Okay. Podcast. This is podcast number 3. So this is end of March. So I would say we just start it as April's podcast. Since we're at the end of the month, there's no point calling it March. So let's start afresh with the April podcast. Now, in the last podcast, the February podcast, we spoke about having a guest coming in, which was to be Ewan Simpson, to discuss the 18th edition of the electrical regulations. So let's do the introductions. I'm Steve McCann, Managing Director of Persis. I'm here with
Ewan Simpson, electrician from Pratt Brothers.
Sean.
It's Sean Stevenson, trainer and consultant for Persis.
I'm Mateo Shablan, Health and Safety Advisor for Persis.
Fantastic. So slightly different format this time because we're all under lockdown for, I can't remember the reason. It's not news or anything, is it? This coronavirus. This is has been non-stop, so I'm sure we're all sick of hearing it. We'll try not to mention it too much, but obviously we're going to have to discuss it. But let's see if we can try and have a relatively COVID-free discussion on some of the other topics. What's been going on in Persis this month? Nothing. We've been in lockdown, so that's that no COVID discussion thing completely out the window. Client news? Nothing. They've all been on lockdown. I see a theme here, guys. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see any way out of this. Developments. Anyway, right, let's just go straight to the newsletter. Have a quick chat about... no, we do have a few developments. We had some courses which have achieved our CPD accreditation with KOSH. The KOSH course, which was confirmed this morning as having achieved the CPD standard. So anyone that does our KOSH training course ends up with a CPD certificate. A lot of our online courses have the CPD. And we Zishan put out an alert yesterday that we're offering free courses for everybody that's stuck indoors. This week it's the environmental awareness course. So anybody wants it, they simply send an email, click on the link, whatever it is, and they get a free course, free training course. We'll try and offer one every couple of weeks for as long as we can. As long as this goes. It could be we run out of time. It could be we run out of courses. It could be we run out of money. That's a very real problem that we're all going to face. So, guys, let's go to the newsletter. Let's start off with Matt. You had a newsletter article. What newsletter article is it you want to?
Yes, I had an article from the Construction Index. So it kind of gives detail of the financial support for businesses that's offered from the government. So if you go into the link, there's a breakdown of everything that's available and how to apply for it. In the comments section, which you will see once the newsletter comes out, there's a link to the government website, which is updated daily. So that gives you a bit more detail. You can actually go and apply for some stuff on there as well.
Okay.
So if you find yourself in struggle, there's things like cash grants, time to pay tax service, income tax deferral. So I'm sure there might be something of value in that article.
Maybe it's just me, and I don't know what you guys think of it, but I personally think that the government needs to give much clearer guidance in relation to the construction industry over COVID. Down in England, especially in Scotland, we've had our First Minister, and Wales and Ireland, I believe, have been the same, where their First Ministers have essentially put a stop to the construction work. But Michael Gove had said it's okay for major construction works to continue. I don't quite understand how this can be the case. How can they keep their 2-meter rule? How can they get to work without giving them individual vans? How can they make sure that there's no cross-contamination from keeping this clean?
Or even how construction can be considered essential at a time like this.
Yeah, some construction sites, I suppose, could be essential. Demolition sites, for example, if they're making the building safe, construction sites where they're finishing things or maintenance works, if there's a major issue. But just new building stuff, I can't see how that's essential. Everybody should be in their houses. Unless they're building hospitals or building places for the homeless or those in need, I don't see anything else can be really considered essential.
I think it's not just an issue with construction sites as well. I mean, there's manufacturing, warehousing. Basically, at first, everybody got the idea that only key workers would be going to work, but then it's basically come out that if you can't work from home, then you must go to work. That is not just key workers. That's everybody. Unless you work in a shop, of some kind, and it's not a supermarket.
An essential service shop. And being a demolition engineer, I was trying to work from home this morning, but Edo went mental. I just took a wall down, started stripping out the kitchen. Apparently, I'm not allowed to work from home anymore. I think. I don't think. Build UK released guidance. I wrote a blog about it this morning to send over to Zishan to get put out. Build UK put guidance on standard operating procedures for guys that are still working. I think if anybody wants to go into the blog and have a look at that, I think it's important. But also, when we go back to work, as I put in the blog, once this lockdown's finished, there's going to be still a huge amount of cross-contamination. People are still going to have the virus lingering in their systems. So I think every company should at least consider putting in some type of standard operating procedure for this, and this could be in the middle of next year. So,
yeah, like a return to work kind of thing, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it? Yeah,
absolutely. Anyway,
I was just thinking there's a point on the online courses, what you were on about, just discussing earlier. I think we should make it clear if someone does want access to them, exactly who should they email, and exactly what CPD is, because I'm not sure if some of the listeners might not know exactly what you mean by CPD accreditation.
Well, it's a good point. To clarify, CPD stands for Continual Professional Development. It's a third-party certification, which means that you can claim for CPD in most professional industries. I'm not really sure of exactly all of them, but I know that medical professionals, for example, need to follow CPD. Demolition engineers need to follow CPD. Members of IOSH, the Institution of Occupational Safety and Health, need to follow it. So it means that these guys will be able to claim, in many cases, at least core hours. I know that the demolition engineers don't consider CPD to be core hours. You have to do an IDE course, or more likely attend an IDE seminar. But you can claim CPD certified in most courses as non-core, for non-core hours. So, yeah, most professional people are able to use it. If not, like we said, they're free. So if you just want to stay sharp, do something that's interesting, no cost. You've got a lot of downtime. There's only so much Emmerdale Farm you can watch, or Big Brother. So maybe you should consider jumping on a free course. I think we'll maybe do next week or the following week. Sean, you did one on Stanley knife awareness, I think, or sharps. Maybe release that one next.
Yeah, well, there's a Stanley knife awareness one to come out, and there's the sharps. Sharps is a separate one, which is mainly focused around needle stick injuries.
I think we'll release one, or we'll have a chat about this offline, figure out what it is. But I think just to keep everyone sharp, see what we can do, see if we can release something. Okay. Anyone else have anything to add on the government thing?
The best to email you as well. Sorry, Stephen at Persis.
Stephen at Persis or Zishan at Persis. Probably Zishan. fact, if you forward it on to me, I'll only forward it on to Zishan anyway. I am not the most IT savvy guy in the world. I'm not even the most IT savvy person on this podcast right now. And that says a lot considering who I've got here on this podcast. So yeah, I think probably send it to Zishan. Okay, newsletter article that you sent in, Sean.
Yeah, I'm.
You want to discuss North Sea oil, correct? Can you talk us about that?
Yeah, so there was actually one that Neil sent in, which is actually better than mine, to be honest. So I'm going to discuss that one, and it's discussing how the North Sea Oil Company, based in Scotland, is accused of sending off oil rigs to India to be decommissioned, which is, according to this article, at least illegal under British and international law. And GMS specifically is the company that has been accused of doing it, and they've basically been sending them off to India for obvious reasons. Rather than having to pay what guys would get over here doing that kind of work between 11 and 15 pound an hour, they're paying 35 pence an hour and operating no real green recycling policy whatsoever. In fact, the place where they're supposed to be sending it to, which is called, I'll just find it. There's shipbreaking yards, India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. And the places, I'm trying to find a specific name of that one. Anyway, the place has just been, they've sent around drones and seen that the entire site is just littered with not toxic and non-toxic waste. Obviously not very safe working procedures. There is reports of up to 150 deaths in previous years. So yeah, it's not a very good thing for this company, GMS. And apparently the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency have got involved and prevented it any more from being sent off to this Haryana shipbreaking yard, it's known as.
I was sent a link on BBC iPlayer. I'm going to see if I can pick this up right now while we're talking, from Alan Locke of AKL Assessments, and it was very much in the same thing. I think it was called A Deadly Trade, and it was a documentary disclosure. Is the North Sea oil industry complicit in exploiting workers in India? 29 minutes long, available for the next 11 months. I don't know if we're allowed to say that in a podcast. I don't see why we can't. But yeah, it's very much about the same thing. Exploitation of third world countries from the North Sea oil industry. So yeah, but then again, so there's no reason for them to be sending to underdeveloped countries unless they're trying to support them correctly, which clearly they're not doing. Yeah.
You can just see as well when you do go to these rail decommissioning sites where they actually put money into the rail money into making it safe and environmentally friendly, that it's not cheap. You know, they have to put a lot of money into it, so you can see where the incentive is. Well, it's from a moral standpoint, which is what we're supposed to be in a civilized country. It's the moral question that is the big issue.
Yeah, I think anybody putting profit over morality needs to take a good hard look in the mirror. But are we not seeing that right now?
That's true.
You know? It's we can all sit here and say it's not the right thing to do. How many other people would do the right thing when faced with the same circumstance? Our own political leaders are not doing it. You know, playing. Somebody texted me yesterday saying that they're playing chess with the economy, and I replied with, "They're playing chess with the economy now. Shortly, they realise they've been playing Russian roulette with people's lives."
That's
and
true.
unfortunately, the gambling chips that they're using in the economy. Why did Trump put $2 trillion into the economy, which is going to artificially float it, and not take that $2 trillion and put it into the people's pockets of those who can't afford to work now? Why are we going to keep doing this?
Yes.
The unemployment rate has jumped massively in America. There's a video of kind of over the years kind of spiking up, and as of recently, it just shoot right up.
Americans have very different employment laws from us. You know, they can just simply walk into a room and go, "You're fired," and that's that. You know, they can fire somebody because they don't like how someone looks. They can't do that here, or they shouldn't be able to do that here because we have employment law. America's very different. So once it hits America, and it's hitting it hard now, people will just be laid off. Where here, people are going to be stuck in the house with the employer paying their wages and then claiming it back off the government.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's us back into COVID territory.
Yes. I think everything that you come up with, I mean, we're talking health and safety at every point where you talk as negligence or morality or anything, we're really going to be able to tie it back to this whole crisis one way or another.
Well, I suppose it can be argued that COVID is the health section of health and safety.
Yes.
So every time we discuss it, but for me, it's not that it's not important. I just think people are going to be sick of it. That's all they're hearing. And I may be wrong. People may be wanting to listen to it, but I think there needs to be a line drawn of how much saturation we have on the same subject. Anyway, let's. Is there anything anyone else wants to add on the North Sea oil stuff that Neil sent in?
No, I don't have anything to add. But I think what I'd like to add to the COVID, since we still kind of add the topic, the thank you to the NHS, and I think the round of applause at 8 last night was a really good thing.
Yeah. Hopefully, people now start to see how important these people are, and don't give them abuse when they're stuck in accident emergency.
Yeah.
Actually, maybe
these guys
will get a pay rise too. They were just last year, the year before, they were complaining they don't get paid enough. It's amazing how quickly the government found the money when their hand was forced, wasn't it?
Yeah, they were all. I mean, wasn't that long ago. They were all on strike.
Yeah, exactly.
Junior doctors and nurses because of the changing of the contracts that the government was bringing in, and certain media outlets, many of them were definitely demonising nurses and doctors and accusing them of putting patients at risk, which I imagine is the last thing nurses and doctors want to do. It's the reason they got into the job. They definitely didn't. Nurses, at least, definitely didn't get into it for the money. And yeah, it's funny how they change they can change the tune.
Yeah, these same news outlets, or let's just call them rags, are the same ones now. They'll be calling these people heroes. Yeah, you're right. How quickly they change their tune when they're selling newspapers. AFK had a very good speech about that. I won't go into it at the minute. I want to change the subject a little bit, but he did note on the way newspaper people report the news. One thing I will say about the coronavirus is there's the IR35 tax claims which the government is pushing through. That's been suspended, which is fantastic. So for those that aren't aware, it was very simplistically where the employers were having to hold, or companies or clients, whatever it was, were having to hold certain amounts of tax and pay that directly to the taxman. So you basically became a tax collector for VAT, as a relatively simplistic way to put it. And that's now being delayed because of this COVID-19 thing, which I personally think is great. I think it's going to be a headache.
We spoke about the red diesel in the last podcast as well, as far as I can remember. But I don't think that'll be going ahead either, isn't it?
Well, I hope not. Not because I don't think the environment's a worthy cause or anything. I think there's been too much stress put on employers and businesses, and pushing all this through is just going to add to that stress. There'll be an awful lot of companies going bankrupt, and a lot of people in financial difficulty because of this. So I think any stress that the government or contractors or clients or whomever, banks, etc., can take away from people, I think is only going to be for the benefit of everyone.
Yeah, I think I was just thinking with the all environmental impact, we were talking about the things like the oil rigs. I think a lot of companies may be questioning sustainability-wise whether a lot of the journeys that they make are actually necessary. Think about the diesel and the petrol that gets burned, and we all know that through control measures, one of the best ways to control something is to avoid to control the risk from something is to avoid it altogether. And many of these journeys now, I think questions are going to be, people are going to be asking: are these journeys necessary? Do people need to be driving for an hour every day, sat in the traffic with their engines running, when a lot of the work can be achieved from their own homes? So it'd be interesting to see once this is all over what kind of changes businesses will be making, and what kind of impact that will have. I heard already that in China, apparently the pollution rates dropped massively when they kept everybody in the homes because the factories were no longer going. And there was one report that I'm not sure how true it is, but they believe that there may have been more lives saved from the lack of pollution than the amount of lives that were lost to coronavirus. Which I'm not 100% if that's true, but that would be interesting if that's the case.
I think that's probably true, but I don't think there'll be any real studies done on that yet. But yeah, you can clearly see through some photographs that there's major cleanups. So the environment started to clean itself up. But that being said, it's social media. You can't believe everything on social media. You see,
I think I heard this on Radio 4, to be honest.
Did you see the pictures of the dolphins returning to Venice, which is known to have been photoshopped? Where the fish returning to Venice would be the most important thing, because the fish breathe through the water, and that's a better demonstration, in my opinion, that the pollutants are gone than a dolphin, which breathes air. If the dolphins are there, which apparently they're not, they're there to eat the fish, not because they can swim in the canal. So the fish returning would be the biggest story, because they're the ones breathing through the contaminated waters.
Well, of course, dolphins are way more exciting.
Oh yeah. Just
that's why that gets pushed through. Yeah.
And it's I found I don't know if you've seen there was a lot of talk about electric cars, and I mean, personally, I think this target that we've heard from the government of getting rid of all petrol and diesel cars by 2030, 2035. Mm-hmm. And it just seems, I think it's 2030, to be honest. That's the next 10 years to get rid of millions of petrol and diesel cars and replace them all with electric cars, which to me just seems completely unrealistic. And the batteries, what they were saying they will be making with lithium or cobalt, and one of the main places to mine cobalt is from the seabed. And the issue that they're saying is that we will be saving the air, really only in Britain and maybe other countries with the same kind of targets, but at the same to achieve that, we're destroying the seabed and polluting the ocean. So whether that seems necessary or even sensible is not a whole other question.
You were going to say something there?
I know. Just recently, I was talking to someone about electric cars, and obviously, because car charging and stuff's starting to become a huge part of our business and what we do and whatnot. And it's not only the fact that I don't really know much about the mining side of how the batteries are made and whatnot, but I do know that like the national grid as it stands, it can't physically cope with that rapid, a change in sort of legislation. Like it can't cope with that many cars charging at once. I mean, there's a huge amount of infrastructure work that would need to be done just so that the national grid itself could support, the amount of car charging they sort of require. I mean, if you just changed it all in that sort of short period of time, it's completely unfeasible for us to essentially rebuild an electrical grid to support it.
I suppose you also need to consider how much money we'd lose through taxation.
Absolutely, yeah.
How many jobs we'd lose. It's an entire industry going away on.
I mean, it's that it could create a huge amount of jobs, and sort of if there was a massive influx of I don't know, budget put in towards it or whatnot. But as things stand at the moment, the grid itself couldn't support that rapid a change, if you know what I mean, or that much electricity being used at once. Because I mean, it is a huge amount of electricity getting used, just in car charging. It's unbelievable.
Is there anything on this in the new 18th edition?
Yeah, there's a complete section on car charging and whatnot. I mean, I wasn't going to talk about that. I was going to talk about the main part.
Too late now.
Well, it's too late now, but I mean, obviously the reason I came on the podcast was just because I just recently done the 18th edition updates, and I just wanted to pick out a few of the main parts that kind of just interested me more than anything, and obviously relate towards, like obviously you do a lot of sort of risk assessments on fire inherency and stuff, so I picked out sort of 2 items that I kind of thought they would be quite good to talk about. And surge detection and AFDDs, which is arc fault detection devices, which obviously they protect against transient overvoltages, which is like lightning strikes and whatnot. And no, sorry, it's SPDs. Sorry, I'm getting carried away with myself. But yeah, SPDs, they protect against transient overvoltage, which is obviously like lightning strikes and such. So anything that's like interrupting the electrical system, obviously putting surges on pieces of equipment and whatnot. I think the most interesting part of it is that they're becoming a domestic. They're getting installed domestically now, and I mean, I've installed them for years as a commercial, sort of over voltage protection. But it's becoming a more domestic thing now. It's almost a compulsory sort of thing to install.
Now, is this the arc detection device that you spoke to me about the other day? It was a Siemens kind of block.
Yeah.
What's the difference between that? What's the trip thing that I have? Obviously, I'm the most gifted electrician you've ever heard, hence the reason that.
I tell you what, I'm not nervous about this podcast. I feel like that at the moment. In your house, like in sort of normal domestic properties, you have MCBs, which is a miniature circuit breaker. MCB.
What does that sound? Miniature circuit breaker.
Miniature circuit breaker, and you'll have RCB protection as well, which is a residual current device.
Okay.
And obviously, I've done a wee bit more sort of digging into AFDDs, and I just noticed that Crabtree do an AFDD which provides MCB protection, RCB protection, and arc fault protection. And obviously, the new thing, speak about arc fault is, obviously, if there was any breaks, crushes, or, slight sort of loose connections in accessories and whatnot, creating sparks and stuff, which obviously, I mean, these arc fault detection devices, they'll basically prevent, a fire from occurring from obviously time, with time and stuff, arcing and heat build-up and whatnot. They'll essentially foresee that trip, and then they will not reset until that fault has been, rectified. So I mean, they're an incredible piece of kit. Like, I mean, obviously they're expensive.
Does it tell you where the fault is, or just...
No, it can't tell you exactly where the fault is, but I mean, obviously you're doing it on each individual circuit. So what it can tell you is on, essentially your downstairs sockets. It'll tell you, you've got an arc fault somewhere on your downstairs sockets, which obviously is going to be a nightmare to locate, but I mean, at the same time, it's preventing your house from going on fire eventually, you know what I mean? And I think last year alone, I looked up some statistics and stuff. There was over 13,000 fires in Britain relating to arc faults.
Wow.
So I mean, it's a good piece of kit, and I mean, if it's going to prevent 13, obviously over time these will start becoming a more installed piece of kit. Because at the moment it's not completely mandatory to have AFDDs installed, but I mean it's an option which I can't oversee now. I think it's an incredible piece of kit. I mean, and if you could just imagine if they were doing that in every property, you're doing away with a whole heap of problems. You know what I mean? Obviously fires and stuff caused by arc faults.
Well, it could be that it becomes a mandatory.
I think it will. Obviously, it's a new thing.
Yeah.
It's really expensive to be installed, but I mean, I think over time it's going to become mandatory. Like RCDs are mandatory. I mean, I remember when residual current devices came out, it was exactly the same process that we're going through now with the AFDDs, and SPDs are mandatory after a risk assessment and whatnot. But it is over time. I think it's going to become a mandatory piece of kit that's going to have to be installed.
Well, the government has just introduced a new fire safety bill. A couple of days ago, it was. Obviously, we won't hear about it. There's something else that's on the news quite a lot at the minute, kind of overshadowing everything. But the government has released a new bill that it may, I don't know if it's going to add on to or amend the regulatory reform, the fire safety order. But that's all because of the Grenfell Tower inquiry.
All right.
So the building safety thing. Yeah, I'm not 100%.
That was the Grenfell Tower. That was an electrical fault, was it not?
It was. It started it, yeah.
And I'm not sure. Was it not like a refrigerator or something?
Yes, yeah. It was the refrigerator that caught fire. Yeah. But obviously, it was the fact that from fire safety point of view, tower blocks would usually be protected per flat.
Yes.
And the problem is your flat sets on fire, but everybody else is protected. But the problem is when you're surrounded by flammable cladding, as soon as that fire gets out of the flat onto the cladding, then it spreads to everybody's flat. And I believe that's also why the idea
that itself. I mean, I read a wee thing this morning about AFDDs, and they are going to become a compulsory thing in dwellings with flats. Obviously, anywhere with combustible materials like cladding. Essentially, these pieces of kit have been pushed, I think, now because of the Grenfell fire. I just think such a catastrophe like that has really forced them into sort of have to rethink certain things, obviously, and take domestic, electrical systems a wee bit more serious,
Always a thing, though, isn't it? Somebody gets hurt, there's a knee-jerk reaction to improve it. People don't do anything until they're absolutely forced.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only when we realise that the things we're putting in place aren't working because there's a major issue that these things go overhauled. So there was another item that you wanted to talk about on the.
Sorry, I got a bit excited there. Kind of.
You're passionate about it.
I obviously I start tongue twisting myself and stuff when I get going about things. But it was surge protection that I wanted to talk about. And
what's that?
SPD surge protection. That's what I kind of mixed into the AFDD earlier when I was talking. Surge protection is the protection against transient overvoltage. which is obviously caused by like lightning strikes and such. And they're to be installed obviously after a risk assessment into the sort of, well, there's a great part in the actual 18th edition, which is looks like a map of Britain, and essentially shows you like sort of areas of high lightning strikes, and I mean it's so interesting, trying to figure out where it is the most important to install these things. And obviously we've started installing them in all properties that we do at the moment. Obviously we're a commercial company more, but if we're doing anything domestic, we started installing singular surge protection devices in the circuit, at the mains. But that's became a mandatory thing. The surge protection.
That's mandatory.
Yeah.
In 18th edition now. Is that for domestic or only for commercial?
For domestic and commercial. So yeah, no, it's quite. Sorry, I got cut off there. I mean, it's obviously it's required where like an install would be like in a high risk area, like I say. We've started installing them. The thing I get in the most sort of hassle from is like a lot of other electricians and stuff are like phoning up and stuff at the moment, going like, "What the hell are these things? And what's the point?" And actually putting them in, and I think it's quite self-explanatory. I mean, it's like an obvious.
Yeah, totally self-explanatory. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, why doesn't everyone know what they are?
No, but I mean, for electricians, I think it's quite an obvious thing. You know what I mean? You're preventing, like damage to electrical equipment. You're preventing interruption of, sort of interruption to your electrical system. And I think obviously, I mean, in the long run, it'll cut off.
You cut off again. I think it's not on mute, mate. You there, pal?
I'm here now. I'm here.
Maybe it's your signal that's cutting you off and on.
But, yeah, so I mean, that's all I really want to talk about was SPDs and ASPDs.
So with this surge protection, if we had a blackout for any kind of reason, is that the similar kind of?
Yes, essentially the piece of kit. It'll trip out and it'll prevent any over voltage passing from the sort of main electrical sort of grid into your house. So I mean, obviously, like that then sort of saves all your equipment and stuff in the house from being damaged from over voltage.
Reducing the severity.
You're totally reducing the sort of risk of damage to any piece of sort of sensitive equipment and whatnot.
Yes, it's definitely important.
Which obviously prevents fires and stuff. Being caused by a massive over voltage in the piece of equipment or whatnot.
Like having a fuse for your house.
Essentially, it's like having a fuse against like a lightning strike.
Yeah.
What would be a price of something like that, just from the top of your head?
Top of my head.
Just on average, I know there's probably different ones, but
I'm not really sure. I mean, you can obviously look it up just now.
The Schneider electrical surge arrestor, because I looked it up earlier on, is £327.
Yeah.
Siemens one that we spoke about last time, Ewan, is 161.
Yeah, and
the types.
Obviously there's various different types. Like Wilex will do one, MK do one, I'm sure. Hager do them, and they're more domestic. That's pieces of kit that are more likely to be used in a domestic property.
But considering you can protect your house from going on fire for £300 pounds, I think that's a good deal.
It's the same with the FDDs. I think you can prevent sort of like huge problems from just spending a few hundred extra quid, and then saves you a huge amount of expenditure in the long run. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but then again, we all know that when it comes down to money, some people will just ignore it, and they won't do what they're meant to do.
I mean, I think that's the hardest thing, is that I think a lot of people think that, when an electrician recommends a piece of equipment like this, they're recommending it to line their own pocket. You know what I mean? But it's actually not the case. You know what I mean? They're doing it, we do it to sort of prevent us from having to deal with, a huge problem or a huge investigation into us. Did you do this installation properly? And when these things are obviously optional and whatnot, or you're trying to convince someone to spend 300 quid, on the, extra on top of maybe, I don't know, 400 or 500 quid.
They don't see the benefit of.
They're like, right, so why am I nearly spending £1,000 now on this fuse board upgrade? And it's like, well, it's quite hard to obviously explain this to, someone that's, is trying to sort of save money or whatnot, or, doesn't really see it as an issue, even for, we have to deal with this every day of our lives, as electricians. We have to sort of, we think about these risks and problems and, fires, and I mean, there's, you're constantly is on your mind, and it's just, basically, it's like giving yourself a peace of mind, when you leave an install, that it's going to be protected from, surges, it's going to be protected from arc faults, and residual current devices. It's you're kind of like, I don't know, giving yourself peace of mind, leaving a sort of a job, essentially.
Well, now that it's mandatory, I'm sure the insurance guys will jump on that.
Yeah,
it'll become an issue that they'll just null and void insurance if it's not installed, if it's not maintained.
I mean, I think that's definitely.
So does that play into hardwire testing on a 5-yearly cycle? So commercial properties have to have the hardwire testing done every 5 years. Does that mean you'll need to flag that up, that needs installed? And
obviously you'd flag that up if it needs installed. But I mean, it's obviously to do, when you do sort of hardwire testing, you're only testing on the regulations that were in place when that install was done. So if it's like, a 10-year install, you're taking into consideration the fact that it was done to the regulations that were there 10 years ago. Obviously, we recommend, these upgrades to sort of bring you in line with the new, obviously, regulations.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're kind of restricted in the sense that you can't go, this is, you need to do this. I mean, if it was fine when the install was originally done, then it still sort of stands as fine. We put that down as a recommendation then. But I mean, it's still, I mean, you kind of like, ideally, you kind of cover your own back by sort of saying, we've recommended this. If you've not done it, it's completely up to you now. You know what I mean? It's completely up to the person that owns the property or whatnot to sort of then deal with. As long as we make it clear to them that, this is our reason for telling you need to install this. And
well, my thought has become that if it's driven by the regulation, and that becomes part of your hardware test, and insurance guys then, based on Grenfell, the insurances have all went up. So is it a case that the insurance might start to say, if you don't have this, or once this comes up in a recommendation, you need to do it, or we're just not going to insure you. So it could force companies to have it, and it could render them uninsurable. So a lot of these guys, the electricians, the sparks, are going to get a lot of hard time saying, well, you've insisted that we do that, and that's not the case. So you guys are going to have a lot of arguments, I think, moving forward.
Absolutely.
Unless it's an education, you say, no, this is why I'm having to recommend it.
Yeah.
I think from a residential perspective, you're going to get people going, why do I have to spend this kind of money?
Yeah, that's exactly what it's saying.
Yeah, if you can get commercial, and like, all you've got to do to speak to an employer, all you've got to say is, well, you won't, if this place burns down with all these people in, you're liable because you haven't done as far as is reasonably practicable to protect them. And that's
But if the insurance push that and say you have to have it, and that's that, it'll eliminate a lot of that. A lot of people complain. A lot of business owners will complain and say, "Well, you've cost me £1,000." but if I don't do it, I can't get insured, or my is going to go up high.
Yeah, if they make it the bottom line, then there's no choice.
Yeah, but surely that's going to bring potentially the cost of insurance down. If you say, look, I've got all these protection devices
Absolutely.
to the insurance, like a black box on your car, that brings, but without the limits, obviously on your appliances.
Will it bring the insurance down? It might bring the insurance down for a couple of years, and then everyone's got it. Then it becomes the norm, and then insurance goes back up. Because God forbid these guys give you any savings.
I mean, in the end, it's not. I mean, you've got to think about it as safety, personal safety, not the money side of it. You're actually sort of, you're protecting people, properties against going on fire and whatnot.
Yeah,
it's not really a monetary thing. It's kind of like it's a safety thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but if it then brings down the insurance, maybe with the amount that you're saving, you'll be able to buy the device.
Yeah,
potentially.
I mean, obviously, it's maybe a good way of convincing someone that this is a worthwhile piece of kit getting, because you might be saving money here or there.
Yeah, you're going to save the money on the insurance, so why not?
It's not really about the money at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about the sort of safety of the people that are going to be living in the property, or the people that are going to be working in the building.
But it shouldn't be, Ewan. That's the thing. It shouldn't be about the financial impact. It should be about the safety of people. But unfortunately, in the world we live in, there's a lot of people that just don't care.
I mean, obviously, the reason I say that is because I think electricians are getting a hard time, because people think that we're just making these things up, like, oh, you need to get this installed, because obviously I want to make a few extra quid, and it's actually not the case. It's more like we want to leave the best installation, safest installation possible, and when we recommend that this is the sort of parts and that you need to bring it up to the sort of safest standards, then it's not really about us trying to find a wee job for ourselves. It's kind of like we want to leave this property in the safest way possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like if we were to work on a building where part of it, there was part to come down and part to stay up. If the building that was supposed to stay up collapsed 2 weeks later, we'd be getting asked a lot of questions. What we'd done to it, and that's the kind of thing. If it burns down, then you're the one that
it burns down a few weeks later because of an arc fault.
Yeah,
you're kind of like shit.
Excellent. Is there anything else you want to add from the 18th edition? I kept calling it Chapter 18, but then
no, you said that to me. I thought you were speaking about it from Chapter 18, or is it 14? You said 14.
As a Chapter 14.
I think that's the chapter my dad worked through. With 14, but not really. I mean, I'll maybe add a wee bit about the course itself. I mean, I obviously just recently done my update for the 18th edition.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's quite a massive amount of information forced on you in one day. So I thought obviously that you do it through Select and whatnot. They give you an amazing sort of online package thing that's like, it's like basically you do like a lot of the sort of revision on your laptop. You go through it all, and it's really good. It's like step by step almost. So I can't recommend to like any electricians that are listening that need to do this update to do that properly. Like really look through it, read it as much as you can, because on the day of the upgrade, so much information gets forced on you at once. It's like a bombardment, and especially when like me, I'm on the tools all the time, so it's like I'm not an office-based electrician. I don't really always have time to sit and read through my regs book and whatnot. I work obviously a lot on just sort of experience, the sort of understanding and whatnot. But obviously your regs book's always there to help you. But I mean, like I say, on the day of this 18th edition, like so much information is just thrown at you at once, and it's hard to keep up with. But obviously, you should get through it as long as you do obviously the sort of free revision sheets and stuff that they send you. I mean, it's like I say, are really helpful. You know what I mean?
And for those that don't know, what is Select?
Select is the sort of governing body for electricians. You also have the NIC as well,
Which it stands for?
National Inspection Council of the National Electrical Inspection Council.
So what you're saying is, do the updates properly, do it through the governing body, study hard for it.
Yeah.
I think that's good advice for everybody.
That's all I can say about that.
On everything, do it with the correct people, and just take it seriously.
Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. Well, guys, is there anything else you want to add? Anything else you want to touch on, discuss?
If everyone can like and subscribe, and just pass on the podcast to anyone you think would be of relevance. It'll be on the Apple Podcasts and on the Spotify.
Yeah. I'm just thinking that electrical information you just give there, now that's useful not only for electricians, but really anybody who's planning on doing any kind of construction work or extension building or building of, property investment or anything like that, really.
Yeah.
Because it's an additional cost that they will need to take into account going forward. So it's not just, I would say, the mass amount of people, especially these days, that are getting into property investment. It's got to be a useful bit of information. It's definitely useful for me because I like to know as much about regulations, and electrical is not one of my strongest areas.
Well, even for CDM people,
CDM as well as
sharp. Any principal designer needs to be sharp on updates. So, any principal designers out there, they get looking into this. And if not, we can just give you Ewan's phone number. Thank you. Is it anything else anyone wants to discuss or add other than like and subscribe? Add any questions anybody's got, please fire them across to us, and we'll see if we can address them next time. I think that's it then. I think that's at the end, guys. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for coming.
Thanks very much, Rosie.
Thank you.
Hopefully next time we can do it at the new office. Hopefully next time we can do videos, get it on YouTube as well. But at the minute, while we're housebound, we kind of have to do it this way. But guys, thanks for your time. Matthews, Sean, and Ewan.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.